And it gives me great pleasure to introduce onto the show today somebody that I have connected with and worked with many, many times over the years. I had a great meeting with him last week, learning about an EdTech product that he's been developing as well. But today he's coming over and talking about his role in his school and sharing some tips, some top tips, in fact, about his work in the school. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the show today the one, the only, and you're probably known by his Twitter handle rather than his real name, but his name's Tim Evans, and we all know him on social media as EdTech Evans. Welcome, Tim. How are you doing?
Hey, Mark. How are we doing? Thanks for having me on.
No, really good to have you. So for those who don't know you, Tim, could you just share a little bit about who you are, where you work, a bit of your sort of history in education, as it were?
By all means, yes. So, Mark, I'm currently here in Hong Kong at the moment. So I'm working at Stamford American School, where I'm the Educational Technology Coordinator. As you well know, I'm originally from Wales. There, I got into teaching, and my mother was a primary teacher, so it was in the family. My brothers went in; he was an ICT teacher as well, so I got the bug as well and started in Lampeter Comprehensive School as an ICT teacher. So we're going back, and I'm trying to work out now, 16 years ago, and from there moved to Spain, where I got the international bug for teaching. And I was there for 6 years then, as in digital design teacher at NYP school. And now I'm coming to the end of my 4th academic year here then in Hong Kong, and loving every minute of it.
So, I mean, if you worked in state and in independent and international as well, are there much differences?
I mean, kids are kids, aren't they? We all know that. There's obviously a difference in how things are run, and there's a lot more independence in international schools where it's possibly easier to get things done, a bit quicker to get things done, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, obviously. But it is that idea that, I don't know, it's hard for me to say, the sense of community maybe is possibly there as well. Although I do know people in state schools who built that in their own schools, obviously. But it's slightly different. I think it's more the admin side of things is slightly different. I think when it gets to the nitty gritty front of house with students and kids and everything, I think it's the same wherever we go.
Yeah, I'm minded to agree. I think, the children, like you say, kids are kids, aren't they? Wherever you are around the world, really. The big difference for me that I've noticed over the years is kind of the pressures. And, it doesn't matter what school you work in, there are always pressures. But actually, people often sort of comment that, people in independent and internationals have it a bit easy. But I would completely disagree with that. It's just the pressures are slightly different, aren't they?
And I think it's what you make it, isn't it? It's what you make it. If you want to push yourself, if you want to explore, we're talking about technology, you want to explore technology and things like that. The opportunity's there regardless of the school, isn't it? But again, like I said, potentially there's that administration or those steps where you need to get things done can be slightly easier, possibly, in an international independent school.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right there. So the show's top tips edgy. So I'm jump into some questions for you, Tim, given your experience and everything in not just international schools, but with technology in particular. So as someone who helps to coordinate technology, ICT in your school, in primary, you look at that on a cross-curricular basis, don't you? We were talking just before the show. So how do you go about making sure that you get that breadth of coverage? And can you share some examples of some things that you do in a cross-curricular fashion, but still using that technology?
Sure. I mean, I've mentioned there that 15 years ago I was an ICT teacher, and I'm sure you can relate to this. When we were just teaching Microsoft Word, then we're teaching Microsoft Publisher, PowerPoint, and if we could squeeze some database spreadsheets in at the end of the year, you would. And repeat, it was kind of that kind of standalone. You'd go to a ICT suite, and we've all seen them, rows of computers and things like that. And that's changed, obviously, and one of the things that's driven that is technology itself, mobile devices, accessibility, and even at a cost point, it's more accessible to everybody. So that's how it's come around. So what we're looking at doing now, instead of having your ICT classes where a year 4 would go and they'd learn how to do something on Microsoft Publisher, for example, and we're going back now. That's changed now. So we look at the curriculum first. So we'll meet with curriculum leaders, teams, and we'll think like, what is your content? What are you wanting to achieve? And then we'll look at the technology that's available there. Then we try and roadmap it so every student gets access to everything. Prime example, Google Sites. Now we've had sustainable goals showcase where all the students in grade 5 are using grade 5 year 6 were using Google Sites. So that's what I would come in. I would support the teachers. We have a different model as well, where I almost teach teachers more than I teach students, because we think that we see that as more sustainable. So I will after school or during their planning time, I'll sit down and I will show them how Google Sites works. And the idea then is next year when they do it, I won't have to do that, and I could possibly delve a little bit deeper into the actual skill set. And that it's just a circle. And it's something I've definitely learned over the years. For me, the most important thing in education is communication. You have to be constantly talking with people. You need to be talking to your team leaders. You need to be talking to your teachers, your students, your parents, where possible. Just having those conversations. And I think with conversations comes feedback, and then looking at how you can improve teaching and learning them, basically, and repeat it. We're coming to the end of an academic year now, and we'd look to do the same next year then.
No, I definitely agree. Communication is so important, and it links directly into that really important thing as well of relationships, doesn't it? If you're having that really strong conversation with parents, with children, with teachers, with team leaders, so forth and so on, then that sort of build that triangulation of support, and everyone knows where you're at, what you're trying to achieve. You're responding as well, so they're part of the conversation as well. It's so important, isn't it?
I think, and it's also that culture, and you want that culture of being able to give feedback. You want that culture of receiving, taking on board communication, especially in technology, because we're not all or far from it. Even yourself and myself, we're not experts in everything that is technology. We can't be, because it's changing, it's developing, it's evolving. So I think we're definitely wanting to build a culture of taking risks. A teacher, if they're not comfortable using Google Sites, so be it. That's fine, because why not use the time with your students to learn with them? Do you mean? And share it with them, and say to the students, that bit of honesty, say to the students, look, well, we've not used this before. Let's learn it together. And again, that's building a relationship then, just based off the honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important as well, linking to what you say there about that whole idea of role modeling as well. And you know, I do it plenty as well. And you've mentioned it yourself as well. You can't know absolutely everything. And it changes so quickly. That'll lead into a question later on about using social media for those sorts of things as well. But when you first started talking to me, you mentioned tools like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Publisher, so forth and so on. But you've also mentioned there Google Sites. So you're a Google school. You use Google as your infrastructure for all those different things. And you were talking about sort of training up teachers and supporting them and things. Obviously, in international schools, often it can be quite a transient market, can't it? Teachers will do their 2 years and then move on to the next school. So I'm sure you'll have teachers new to your school coming in September, and they might have just been Microsoft throughout their career so far. So, with that in mind, if you've got teachers who are new to Google, have you got any sort of tips? Because there are so many things you can do in the Google workspace ecosystem, aren't there? Have you got any sort of top tips to share with our viewers on ways in which they can maybe sort of hit the ground running with Google tools?
I think it goes back to that taking a risk. If you don't know, that's absolutely fine. We've literally mentioned that last week. We sent a survey out to new teachers who are coming in. They actually come in August, so we just want to get a rough idea where they are, so we can hit the ground running when it comes to upskilling them. Then, and I also put a question in there: how comfortable are you supporting and leading training as well? So if someone's come in, for all we know, they're a Google certified trainer, well, they can come in and they can support their teams. So it's having those layers of support. So it's not just your EdTech coordinator, your ICT team are in there to support as well. And what we have the thing called digital pioneers. So each department or each grade level, year level, has one or two people who they know they can go to for support as well. Normally they're people who volunteer, what have you. If not, we know certain individuals who have a certain skill set with a certain tool or something. So those teachers know they can go to them. Again, it's that culture of just collaboration, again, communication and things like that. When it comes to Google itself, there's a Google Education Center that I think is absolutely brilliant. Not just Google, I think all the tools in the last year, you've noticed, have really upped their game. They've had to. So Microsoft have really come on Google. I was chatting to someone about how Google Meet has changed in 18 months. Basically, they had to because it was being used. So the education centre as well has improved. So have a look in the education centre, and then I think Google level 1. I think everybody should. If you're using Google tools, you need to explore doing a Google level 1. Basically, it covers everything that you'll need to use in a classroom. What people always say to me, "Oh, what qualification or what certificate should I do?" You talk about your ADEs, your MIEs, and things like that. Obviously, depending on what platform you're using, but the most robust for me is Google. There's no application video. There's nothing that's quite subjective, isn't it? This is a cert. You need to get X amount right. The content is there for you. So I definitely look to do that, and that's something we support our teachers with and request that they look to do at some stage.
No, I love all the offers, to be honest. I mean, not just the sort of courses you can do through the Microsoft Education Center as well, but I love the Microsoft Certified Educators course as well. That's a really good course, I think, because it's not about the tools; it's more about the sort of thinking behind it and design principles and on all those sorts of things. Whichever way you look at it, though, getting yourself, if you are going in as a new to Google kind of person, that level 1 course, it really covers all the bases, doesn't it? So that's a great shout, Tim. Thank you ever so much. I love what you shared as well then, Tim, about being mindful, the questions you were asking in your survey, because as we've seen it with that sort of that graphic which looks at teacher confidence and competence, just like in any classroom where you'll have a wide range of abilities and confidences and so forth and so on with the children. So you have the same thing with your teaching colleagues as well, don't you, when it comes to their confidence and competence in using technology. So, if you've got someone who's already a Google trainer or someone who's already quite handy with these things, absolutely right to be able to ask them the question, and they probably want to be supporting others as well. They're probably used to that in their own organization. So that was really lovely to see. Do you get many people coming to you already sort of qualified up and sort of Google certified and whatnot?
It's literally in the last 2 or 3 years I've noticed a change. I think it's almost become a requirement, isn't it, from schools? So people have definitely taken note of that. And COVID's just accelerated that even more, isn't it? Where people have done. We've had teachers. I've almost said to them, "Go and do it," because you'd comfortably you'll get your level 1. I encourage you to go into the level 2 as well. You're using these tools on a day-to-day basis. So I think more and more people are wary of that. I remember when I did my Google level 1, I found out in about 20-30 minutes if I'd passed, because I think their system was going through tests that fast, where now there's a 4, 5, 6 day waiting list. Not waiting list, but you need to have to wait. That's because I think that's because so many more people are looking to do it. But then at the same time, then on the flip side, as a school, we invest in technology, the tools and the software. If you're willing to do that, I think you need to invest in your people as well, because they're the ones who are using it. So that's not just the financial, that's time as well. So if you're going to buy a brand new set of iPads or brand new set of VR headsets, you have to have in place the idea of how you're going to get the best out of these tools as well. And that's an investment in itself. So again, if someone comes to us and they're not comfortable, we will support them. We will train them where needed. We'll pair them up on a buddy system if that supports them as well within their team. So I think it's very important that you don't just invest in the hardware and everything, that you take note of your personnel as well.
Yeah, you make 2 great points there, really, Tim. Firstly, that whole pedagogy first thing, and starting with the why, that's so important, particularly when you're dealing with some tools that have got a propensity to be a bit gimmicky. For example, like the VR headsets that you mentioned. So keeping that at the core is really, really important. I think the other thing you said, which is really important as well, is thinking about the time and investing in people. I share with schools that I work with, if you're going to invest X in your technology, then you should really try and mirror that investment in your professional learning opportunity, because it is time, but time costs money. To take teachers off timetable, to cover them, to enable them to do those things, that's still a financial capacity thing, isn't it?
Well, I think it also does is, I think, Matt, when you do that as well, you set not so much a precedent, but you set a notion of this, that we value this. So as a school, the teachers and students and parents as well in the independent can see as school, like, they're not just invested money in iPads, they've also invested on training. They've invested on time and planning time that can be directed towards how to use the technology. And by doing that, you're building a digital culture. The teachers are aware this is something we value, and it comes from the top. And we're so lucky here that we're given that freedom to explore stuff. But it's that idea of this is who we are, this is what we do. We talk that word innovation's banded around, but how innovative are you as schools? It comes down to that training and the use of the technology.
Yeah, no, it's so important. Tim, thinking about Google again then, and training people up, a relatively new product which you can have available within the sort of Google Workspace setup is Jamboard. Now I see lots of teachers raving about it, talking about how brilliant it is and so forth and so on. But as a sort of a tool which is relatively new on the scene, as it were, have you got any tips you could share about its use? And for those who don't know what Jamboard is, maybe sort of start by explaining a bit what it is and then give it some sort of use case scenarios.
Yeah, so I mean, if I'm correct in saying, about a couple of years ago, it almost was software and the board itself. It was one of those kind of almost like a Promethean board, one of the smart boards as well, where I think that potentially has not been shelved, but it's gone somewhere else. But now there's that Jamboard platform. It's basically a flip chart, a slide deck, but what is at the heart of it and the essence of it's collaboration. Great timing, wasn't it, with COVID and everything, everyone going online. So we were looking at using it. You could assign, it's almost like a Google slide deck, but just a lot more collaborative. So you could assign a slide to each student or to a group of students. They can come in and insert text, images, the post-it notes, that kind of thing. They can see each other's how it's looking. But then on a teacher side, you can customize the background. So you could put a grid in. You could put in a flow chart. So there's different ways of using it. We've used it talking about training, we've used it in PDs. You know, your traffic light system, like one slide is red, one slide is green, one slide is yellow, and you've customized this kind of thing. So teachers can go in there and use it as well. Google's really pushed it now. So it's part of your Google apps, your Google Workspace suite. As far as you can put jam.new, and it just like you would do docs.new, slides.new. So Google are all over it. But it's just a great collaboration piece. It's been updated recently where you can start seeing the history of it as well, which wasn't in there before. I remember a teacher with us sent me a message, online learning, said, I've changed the backgrounds on Jamboard. Is there any way that I can see the history? Because someone's deleted his background. And I was like, at the moment, you can't see. And about 2 weeks later, it actually just happens that they did update it. So you can start to see the version history now.
Yeah.
But it's a great tool of collaboration at all levels with students. And I presume you could take it down to year 3, possibly be comfortable using it. We enjoy it and we use it regularly.
No, and I can see why. It goes to what I sort of call one of the sort of one of the best things, or one of the best types of edtech, I think, are the ones which are really low entry in terms of how you sort of learn how to use it, but hugely malleable and diverse in the opportunities that it provides. And you kind of mentioned there a little bit in that as well. You know, you can use it with students right down to sort of year 3. I would suggest probably even younger as well, to be honest. But equally, you could use it with students right at the top end of the spectrum as well. So it's low entry, but sort of, you know, in terms of learning how to use it, in terms of the tools that are there, but massively scalable in terms of the learning opportunities and collaboration and sharing and all these different, you know, you can use it for so many different purposes, can't you?
I've seen some people who are far more creative than me, and it's one of, you know, you've probably seen it when you see these ideas on Twitter. You're like, how, that's so simple, but I didn't think of it. So I saw it, they were creating the quizzes. So it's like a Christmas quiz, and it's just like you can drag and drop things like that. Someone created a chessboard, or drafts board. So they all this, and it's simple. And you think, why? But it's just basically black and white circles and things like that. And then they had kids, right, you 3 go and play on this board, you 3 play on this jam, you play this jam. So as a teacher, then you're just bouncing through. So if you creativity side of things, I mean, it's like a blank canvas, and you can see some teachers have been absolutely amazing. And again, we talk about Twitter, they just share it, they go, here's a link to it, off you go, kind of thing. So it's endless possibilities when it comes to using it, like you said.
Yeah, it's huge. You mentioned Twitter then, Tim, and we talked about social media before. You've been sharing on Twitter for quite some time, and clearly, you know, looking at how many likes and retweets and things you get on some of your sharings, clearly what you do is not only resonates with other educators, but the popular ideas and things as well. So thank you for all that you do with all of that. I definitely learn new things when you share stuff. So thank you from on a personal front as well.
No, thank you.
But if others were looking sort of following your footsteps, sharing on social media and all those sort of things, you know, it can be a bit of a sticky place sometimes. Have you got any tips for people who are looking to maybe follow in your footsteps or share a bit on social media?
It's for me, same as you, Mark, and I know you believe this as well. It's the best PD out there, bar none. It's the idea that it's in your pocket. So I'm in a taxi, I'm on the train, or I'm on whatever. I can go on there, and you scroll and you're learning all the time. And that's the first thing. So much so, and as part of our induction, we introduced it to teachers, and we really encourage teachers to be on there. And we've got a school hashtag Stamford HK. We want teachers sharing. So it's another way of seeing. And we've had teachers say, there's a room down the end of the corridor. There's something going on there. They never knew about it until they saw it on Twitter. So again, it's another space for you to share. And it comes down to that. We're all in the same boat. Everybody wants the best for their students professionally. You want to grow, you want to develop. And there's just so much stuff on there for learning. I mean, what I share with people at the beginning, follow Google EDU, follow EdTech, find out your subject. So there's ESL, there's MathEd, there's all these different hashtags. Follow them, and then if you don't feel like sharing or you don't feel like tweeting, don't, just use it. And then all of a sudden, and then I think people with everything, they get to understand the platform, they get to see what's being shared, and they start sharing. And for me, the tweets that are normally the most popular are the simple things that you sometimes think, oh, I like I mentioned Jamboard, I knew that, but I forgot all about it, kind of thing. So I think it's that kind of idea. So what do you do that improves your workflow? What do you do that makes your life easier? Chances are 9 out of 10 people don't know that. So just share it. And I think that's the way people are connecting then, and just collaborating and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a great space and place for asking questions as well, because you know you can go on Google and as a search engine and you know, type in ideas for whatever, and you'll get plenty. You know, don't get me wrong, you'll find some blog posts, probably find 50 resources on the TES, so forth and so on. But when it comes to asking those questions on Twitter, it's timely, it's contextual, it's from real life practitioners. I think it's like a Google search on speed sometimes, and you get so much more.
It's so relevant, and it's so up to date. It's whatever you hope the answers you're getting are the latest answers. Where you can Google things, and I've done it before. You got the blog posts. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was looking for what to do with Google Classroom at the end of the year. So I just put a Google search, and there were blog posts like 2015, 2017, where, for example, one thing I spotted is to-dos has changed to review. So that's come in, and all that kind of stuff. Well, that blog post is obsolete, isn't it? But if you put something like that, or you search something like that on Twitter, someone posted it last Friday, someone posted it last Wednesday, what have you, that's up to date. And you need, especially on the tech side of things, isn't it? We need to stay relevant. We need to stay up to date with what's going on. So it's a great space for that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's interesting you mentioned the Google Classroom thing there, closing down end of the year, because that leads quite nicely onto my final question for you on the show today, Tim. With it being almost the end of the academic year, how do you go about closing things down with technology in your school? I'm guessing most of it's in classroom. How do you go about doing that?
Yes, it's housekeeping. This thing, like, we're one-to-one device, so we collect all our devices in. The way we do this is changing every year. So our very first year, so to take it back a bit, the school opened with us in 2017. So I was part of the founding teachers here, where we collected the devices on the last day of term. But then all of a sudden, little Johnny's not in school. So that kind of thing. So we brought that forward now. So it's a couple of days earlier. We collect the devices in a couple of days earlier. We just want students to back everything up because we re-image, we delete everything on the devices. Google Classroom is a big one because sometimes potentially people don't understand the workings of Google Classroom, the back end. So if you create an assignment, the student then completes the assignment and sends the work to you. And what they're doing there, they're changing ownership. So the student sends it to the teacher who then owns it. Well, if you haven't sent that work back, that kid then doesn't own that work. So again, we want teachers to make sure that every assignment that's been completed, they've sent it back, especially in international and any school. There's a turnover of teachers as well. So that can actually get lost, that work. So there's some potential there just going through ironing out housekeeping and things like that. We do feedback then. We reach out to teachers, what worked, what didn't work. And then we just start planning. We've already planned induction and orientation now. We start in August. So looking at what we're going to do there then. Looking at teams, how the teams change, how the departments change, and plan that the induction. That obviously COVID is an absolute mess, isn't it? But there's been so much that we've learned from it, where a lot of our induction now, which was in person, is now we're flipping it now. It's asynchronous. So again, we're using Google Classroom for induction. And one of the reasons we're using it is because we want to highlight how it can be used. So teachers coming in can see certain things. We use Edpuzzle because we want them to see how Edpuzzle works. We'll be using Jamboard because we want them to see Jamboard. We'll potentially throw in a couple of Kahoots there. The Kahoot goes asynchronous now as well, so you can do a couple of Kahoots. So we're really highlighting the tools we use in the classroom during induction, because it's ticking two boxes or two bits. That idea then that they can actually see that. So we're doing that. So what we're doing now, we're recording videos. Teachers here. So our safeguarding lead, she's recording a video that she's then going to put in an Edpuzzle that we're going to put ready. I've got a video. Our STEAM leaders, our ICT team, our HR team, basically we're creating content in the next couple of weeks, ready for an asynchronous induction then.
So how long's left on term for you now then, Tim?
I'm not counting. 4 days. Four more sleeps, Mark. So we're really, last week now. So it's great, obviously, to end the school year. But then all of a sudden you look at this list of things you've got to do and you're like, yeah, okay, relax for a couple of weeks.
Well, look, listen, it's time to start wrapping things up now, Tim, but I truly hope you have a fantastic break. Sounds like you've massively earned it this academic year.
Big fun.
Best of luck for next, obviously. Before we sign off and disappear, Tim, was there anybody or anything that you wanted to highlight? Obviously, your Twitter handle's EdTech Evans. Anything else people should sort of check out and what have you? I know you've been working on an innovative well-being edtech product.
Yes, actually, thank you for that. I forgot to mention it. So myself and a couple of colleagues, friends here, have been looking at how we gather data in schools and what data we're gathering. And we noticed that most of the data that we do gather is academia, is academic, it's math levels, it's reading levels, it's testing as traditionally know it. So we looked at what we can start doing to support well-being. So we've developed a tool called Speako, so it's at Speako EDU. So give us a follow. And it's a tool that gathers audio and it analyzes the audio. It looks at tone, it looks at pitch, it looks at speed, stuttering, pauses. All this is something about 50 different traits of audio that we don't really recognize. It analyzes this, and it takes a baseline for a 8-year-old female, and then it builds on that baseline with machine learning to get to know that student. So it's analyzing the audio, and after about 8, 9, 10 individual recordings of about 30 seconds to a minute, it gets a good grasp of that individual. So hopefully then within a few months, 6 months, year, this will go on then, but over time, it will learn how this individual speaks and how they converse, with a hope then of flagging any students that could potentially, there's some sort of, and I use the word distress, but it's distress levels in the audio. So then counselors can come in with their intervention. And it comes about where some schools may have one counsellor for 500 students. Some schools don't even have counsellors, it's per county or something. So it's just another tool where they can gather little bit more data that can support well-being and support the child. It's really in its infancy. We're piloting it in a few schools. We've got it down there in South Africa and Australia. A couple of schools are piloting it there because their academic year allows them to do that. By all means, get in touch either with myself, and we're more than happy to give you a demo account to have a play around with. If nothing comes of it, we just want to start that conversation. What are we doing now? Well-being, there's a lot of talk about well-being, but what are we doing in schools to support it? Obviously, we want the tool to be a success and everything, isn't it? But that idea that it just might just be a conversation starter. Which in turn, though, I think if our children are well, they're happy, they're confident, will have a knock-on effect on their math and their reading levels. So I think it's within our best interest, obviously, even if we're looking at academics and things like that. So yeah, it's in its infancy. I can see you put it on the screen there. Have a check it out. Grab us on Twitter there at speako.edu or myself there, and I can connect with you and give you a demo and sort you out an account. Thanks for the pleasure, Mark. Appreciate that for that.
No, not a problem at all. And thank you for your time today, Tim.
Pleasure.
I wish you a fantastic summer break in 4 days. Although from what you were saying, I think it might be maybe 7 days by the time you actually start your break. Don't leave it hanging over your head until a week before you go back. Which I've never done.
I was just about to say that experience.
No, thank you for joining me on Tip Top Tips Edu, and look forward to connecting and working with you again in the future, and look forward to seeing how Speako sort of develops over time as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Cheers, Tim.
You too. Take care. All the best.
Bye.